I hired a plumber to check on my son's house while he and his wife were on vacation. 2 hours after he arrived, he called me with his voice cracking. "Ma'am, I think you need to get down here right now. There's a little boy hiding behind the water heater. He won't come out." I drove there faster than I've ever driven in my life. And what I found in that basement split my family in two. Before I tell you the rest, my name is Sandra Merritt. I'm 65 years old. I live outside of Greenville, South Carolina, in a neighborhood quiet enough that you can hear the crickets at night. For 38 years, I worked as a pediatric emergency room nurse at Riverside Children's Hospital. 38 years of holding small hands in the dark. Of explaining to terrified parents that their child was going to be okay. And on the worst nights of sitting with families when the news wasn't good. I retired 2 years ago. People ask if I miss it. I miss the children. I don't miss what that job taught me to see. You spend nearly 4 decades in pediatric emergency, you develop something that isn't exactly instinct, it's more like a wound that never fully closes. You learn which bruises came from a fall, and which ones didn't. You learn the way a child's eyes slide toward a parent before answering a simple question. You learn to read silence. I always told myself I'd never have to use that knowledge inside my own family. My son's name is Caleb. He's 33, my only child. His father passed when Caleb was in his 20s, and after that it was just the two of us for a long time. Caleb works regional logistics for an auto parts company. Makes decent money. Washes his truck every Saturday. Used to call me every Sunday evening like clockwork, just a son checking in on his mother. That changed when he married Danielle 4 years ago. Danielle had a marketing degree she never seemed to use, and the kind of presence that rearranges a room without asking permission. The first Christmas I hosted them, she spent the afternoon on her phone. When I suggested she help me with dinner, she looked at me like I'd asked her to do something extraordinary. 8 months after they met, Caleb married her at a resort in the Bahamas. I wasn't invited to the rehearsal dinner. I told myself it was just how young people did things now. 3 years ago, I made what I thought was a generous gesture. I owned the 4-bedroom brick house on Carver Lane where Caleb grew up, the house that had gotten too quiet after his father died. I told Caleb and Danielle they could live there rent-free while they found their footing. I kept the deed in my name because my attorney told me to, and because nearly 4 decades of watching families unravel had taught me that paperwork is the only thing that loves you back unconditionally. "Mom, you're the best," Caleb said, hugging me hard the day I handed him the keys. "We won't forget this." People say a lot of things in moments like that. The shelf life varies. The Sunday calls stopped within 6 months. The visits narrowed to holidays, then just my birthday, then a card in the mail with Danielle's handwriting on the envelope. When I suggested coming by Carver Lane, there was always a reason. Danielle was repainting, Caleb had a work deadline, the timing wasn't right. After a while, I stopped suggesting. A mother can only knock on a closed door so many times before she starts to feel like a stranger. So when Caleb's name lit up my phone on a Tuesday morning in early fall, I almost didn't recognize the photo. For months since we'd spoken. No greeting, no "how are you," just straight to the ask. "Mom, listen. Danielle and I are flying to Cancun on Saturday. 8 days. The kitchen sink's been backing up and there's a slow leak under the upstairs bath that's starting to stain the ceiling. Could you call a plumber? Handle it while we're gone. I'll pay you back when we're home." He left a key under a clay pot with a dead plant in it. He said he'd feel better having it done while they were away. I knew what that meant, he just didn't want to be inconvenienced. I told him I'd handle it. He said thanks and hung up. No goodbye, no "I love you." Just the soft click of a man who got what he needed. I called a plumber I'd known for years, a man named Hector Ruiz who'd done maintenance work at the hospital before starting his own company. Good man, steady hands, 3 kids of his own. He said he could come Sunday morning. I gave him the address and told him I'd let him in. Sunday I drove to Carver Lane early. The house I raised my son in didn't feel like mine anymore. Everything painted some shade of expensive off-white. The hallways lined with framed photographs, Caleb and Danielle at beaches, at restaurants, at concerts. Maybe 30 pictures. Not one of Caleb as a boy. Not one of his father. It was as though the first 3 decades of his life had been quietly edited out. I walked through to make sure things were accessible for Hector. When I got to the basement door at the end of the hall, the handle didn't turn. Locked, not a deadbolt, just a small pin lock. I stood there for a moment. Who locks a basement door inside their own house? Hector pulled into the driveway before I could think further about it. I found a hairpin in the upstairs bathroom and popped the lock. Showed him the water heater, the plumbing, told him to call when he was done. Then I drove home and tried to put the locked door out of my mind. I was in my kitchen at 11:30 when my phone rang. Hector. His voice was wrong. Hector was the kind of man who joked through everything. What I heard on that phone was not that man. Sandra. I need you to come down here right now. There's a little boy hiding behind the water heater. He won't come out. He won't talk to me. Please come. I dropped what I was holding. Don't move, I told him. Sit on the steps where he can see you. Talk soft. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I made it in 8. Hector was on the porch when I arrived. No toolbox. No hat. Just standing there with his hands in his pockets like he'd forgotten what they were for. He's still down there, he said. I handed him a bottle of water from my truck and went inside. I went down those basement stairs one at a time. The way I'd learned to move around frightened children, slow, low, no sudden angles. The water heater sat in the back corner behind a half wall of cinder block. I came around it carefully. He was sitting cross-legged on a folded comforter wedged into the gap between the heater and the wall. A little boy. Skinny in a way that takes time to accumulate, the kind of thin where you can see the collarbone through the shirt. Light brown hair, cut unevenly. Dinosaur pajama pants. An oversized gray t-shirt stained at the hem. Beside him, a small flashlight, a coloring book with most of its pages gone, 3 crayons, and a plastic bowl with the dried orange ring of old macaroni inside. He looked up at me, and I saw it immediately. Flat, watchful eyes. Body held perfectly still. Breath shallow and trained. This was a child who had been taught not to be a problem. I crouched 6 feet away and put my hands flat on the carpet so he could see them. Hi there. My name's Sandra. I'm not going to come any closer. I'm just going to sit right here. The man upstairs is named Hector, he's a friend of mine. Nobody's mad at you. I promise. Are you hungry? He stared at me for a long time. Then his lower lip trembled and his eyes filled, but he didn't make a sound. I'd seen that before too. Children who have learned not to cry out loud. Are you supposed to stay quiet, sweetheart? A small nod. Who told you to stay quiet? Danielle. He said it the way children say the name of something they're afraid of. Not Mom. Not stepmom. Just Danielle. Flat as bone. Can you tell me your name? A pause. Eli. How old are you, Eli? I'm 4. I'll be 5 at Christmas. Eli, whose house is this? Caleb and Danielle's. His voice steadied slightly. Caleb is my dad sometimes. When he comes home from the trips, he says hi and sometimes he gives me candy. The trips are when the people are here, so I have to stay downstairs. Danielle says I'm not allowed upstairs because I'm not part of the brand. I had to put my hand on the floor to keep from tilting over. There was a mini fridge tucked under the basement stairs that I hadn't noticed. And on the wall above the futon, a printed calendar. Today had a penciled smiley face. 8 days from now had a red circle around it. 8 days. Pre-made sandwiches in a college mini fridge. A flashlight. 3 crayons. A bowl of dried macaroni. Eli, would it be okay if I carried you upstairs and made you a real meal? You don't have to stay behind the heater anymore. He looked at me with those careful eyes. Will Danielle be mad? I will personally make sure Danielle is never mad at you again for as long as you live. He thought about that. He was 4 years old and he was genuinely weighing whether to trust me. Then he nodded and held out his arms. He weighed almost nothing. Hector was standing in the kitchen when I carried Eli up. There were tears running down his face, a man I had watched fix a burst sewer line without flinching, crying in a kitchen because he understood exactly what he was looking at. I sat Eli at the table and made him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the only thing in those cabinets that wasn't Danielle's portioned meal prep. Hector poured him a glass of milk. That little boy ate that sandwich like he hadn't eaten in days. Then he ate another one. I called 911. I told them I was a retired pediatric ER nurse with a malnourished child, possible long-term neglect, possible unlawful confinement. I used the codes. The dispatcher knew them. The CPS investigator who arrived was a man I'd crossed paths with a dozen times in my career. He took one look at the basement, the calendar, the mini fridge, the gap behind the water heater, the dried macaroni, and his face went the way faces go in this line of work. Completely still. We pieced it together that afternoon. Eli's mother, a young woman named Sarah, had been Caleb's girlfriend before he met Danielle. She died of an overdose when Eli was 18 months old. Caleb was awarded full custody. There was a monthly survivor benefit and a small trust Sarah's own mother had set up before she passed, just over $1,400 a month, deposited into an account with Caleb as custodian. The bank records showed exactly where that money had been going. Almost to the dollar. The lease payments on Danielle's white SUV. Recurring charges at a cosmetic wellness clinic. Month after month for over 2 years. Caleb had a son. My grandson. He was 4 years old. He had been alive for 4 years, and I had not known his name. They had hidden him in my own house. The house I gave them. In the basement where my husband's workbench used to be. And when they wanted 8 days in Cancun, they stocked a mini fridge with portion sandwiches, circled a date on a calendar, and called me to send a plumber over so nothing would seem wrong when they got back. The next morning I filed for emergency kinship placement. I retained a family law attorney whose reputation preceded her by a full city block. Within 48 hours I had a complete file, photographs of the basement, Hector's signed statement, the 911 recording, the medical workup, the bank records, the DMV registration on the SUV, receipts from the wellness clinic, and Danielle's archived Instagram, page by page, every sponsored post filmed in the kitchen directly above where Eli had been sleeping on a folded comforter. My attorney looked at all of it spread across her conference table and said, in 20 years of family law, I have rarely seen a case assemble itself this completely. We are going to pursue permanent guardianship, termination of parental rights, criminal referrals for child neglect, endangerment, and embezzlement of a minor's funds, and co-perpetrator charges for Danielle under the same statutes. Caleb called me from Cancun after local authorities paid him a visit at the resort, which is what happens when there's an open criminal file in the United States with your name attached to a child welfare hold. Mom. His voice was completely different. Mom, what did you do? What I did was answer my phone when a plumber called me in tears. What you did is something I'm still working to understand. He started yelling. I could hear Danielle behind him. I held the phone away until they finished. Listen to me carefully. You are going to come home. You are going to walk into the county sheriff's office and surrender for questioning. You will not set foot on Carver Lane. The locks were changed yesterday because that property is in my name, and you are now a person under criminal investigation by the state for the abuse of a child in my house. And one more thing. Don't ever call that little boy by your last name in front of me again. He was Eli before you, and he will be Eli after you. The only thing his mother ever left him was her name. You are going to give it back." The line went quiet. The next 9 months were a war fought in courtrooms, CPS offices, and the pediatric clinic where Eli got his teeth repaired, his arm properly reset, a green stick fracture that had healed crooked because no one had ever taken him to a doctor, and a vaccination schedule started completely from scratch. I gave him my bedroom and slept on the couch. I bought him a Rayal bed, a comforter with planets on it, a nightlight shaped like a mushroom, and a closet full of clothes that actually fit. I enrolled him in a small pre-K program, where his teacher cried the first time she read his intake paperwork, and then never let him see her do it again. I learned to cook 3 meals a day for a child instead of 1 for myself. I sat on the kitchen floor with him and drew pictures with a brand new box of 64 crayons, because no one was ever going to ration crayons for this child again. The judge terminated Caleb's parental rights at the conclusion of the 3rd hearing. She granted me permanent guardianship and approved my petition for adoption. Danielle pled out to 2 years and a felony record. Caleb took his case to trial. He did not win. He received 4.5 years in state prison for child neglect and felony embezzlement of his son's federal benefits. When she sentenced him, the judge said one line I will carry for the rest of my life: "Sir, you starved your child while you were ordering from a resort menu." The SUV was repossessed. The Instagram brand Danielle had spent years building collapsed in 72 hours when the local paper ran the story. Sponsors disappeared. The audience turned on her the way the internet does. Last I heard, she was working a register outside of town, legally barred from being within 500 feet of any child. I sold the house on Carver Lane. I couldn't walk into that basement without seeing the gap behind the water heater. I used the money to buy a small 2-bedroom cottage near a good elementary school, 5 minutes from a park with a swing set. Eli wore out within a month. He's 6 now. He weighs what a 6-year-old should weigh. His arm healed straight the 2nd time. He laughs out loud, which is something he didn't do for the first 3 months he lived with me. The first time I heard it, I walked into the kitchen and pretended to look for something in the refrigerator so he wouldn't see me cry. He calls me Mom now. He has a best friend named Marcus who comes over for pancakes on Saturdays. His teacher tells me he's smart, kind, and quietly protective of the smaller kids. That doesn't surprise me at all. He doesn't ask about Caleb. He used to early on, in the careful way he asked everything. Then one evening he told me, "I think you're my mom now." I told him I was whatever he needed me to be for as long as he needed me. He nodded, the way a child nods at something he has already decided, and he never asked again. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. Calling the police on my own son. Watching my family come apart. I tell them the truth, my family was already apart. It came apart the day my son let someone lock a child behind a water heater because he wasn't convenient. I didn't tear anything. I just stopped pretending I couldn't see it. I spent 38 years learning to read what frightened children were trying not to say. I thought I was done with that the day I turned in my badge. Turns out the most important moment of my entire career was waiting for me in a basement I'd paid for, in a house I'd given away out of love. I did the work one more time. I'm grateful I still knew how. Go hug a child in your life tonight. Look them in the eyes. Listen to what they aren't saying. The world is full of kids like Eli, some behind water heaters, some in plain sight, and the only thing that reaches them is someone who is paying attention. Be that someone.